Reflection, Chapter 27. Trying to remain calm, Mulan took 3 careful steps deeper into the chamber. So far there were no hissing rocks, sprawling trees, or golden pavilions in the distance. No, for once the chamber was an actual room, one long and hollow enough for the sound of her footsteps and breathing to echo when she moved. Except from the looks of it, there was no way out. Seconds passed, and her apprehension grew. Inside, the chamber was dark as a winter's night, so she couldn't tell how large or deep it was. She blindly stretched out her hands, walking until she touched a wall. It was smooth and cold, like glass. She bent down. The floor was glass, too. Mirrors, she realized, as her sight slowly adjusted to the dark. Mirrors surrounded her from the ceiling to the walls to the floor, yet not one of them reflected her. "Come in," the mirrors whispered. "Come closer, closer." "Who are you?" she said aloud. "Show yourself, I'm ready." The voices laughed, then grew in strength and number. "Are you now?" "No one is ready, not even you, Fa Mulan." Mulan spun. There was no one in the room with her, only herself, and the mirrors. She grimaced. Was this a game? "Where are you?" "Inside," the voices beckoned. "Come closer, look into her eyes, then we can begin." She couldn't pinpoint any particular mirror the voices were coming from, but a soft brown light emanated from the one to her left. It was shaped like a tomb and reminded Mulan of the graves in her family's ancestral temple. A thin stripe of bronze embellished the edges of the mirror, and as she approached, the glass clouded and swirled. Mulan's father appeared. He leaned on his cane, and then he saw her, his brows knit together in surprise and confusion. "Ah, Mulan! You've returned from war." Mulan stiffened. Another illusion. Her pulse quickened, remembering how easy it had been for her to fall for Miang Po's deception. How she'd yearned to make her family proud of her, even if it had been an illusion. "Not this time," she said, steeling herself to face the reflection of Fa Zhou. This time she'd play along, but she won't forget. "Yes, father." "And?" Fa Zhou leaned forward on his cane. The gray patches of hair along his temples were whiter than Mulan remembered. "What have you to say to us?" "The Huns are defeated. The Emperor is safe." Mulan bowed. "I return your obedient daughter." "Obedient?" Fa Zhou's narrow face tightened into a frown. "Your mother thought you had perished in battle." Mulan's shoulders dropped. She'd imagined this conversation with her family countless times. She'd pictured the day she'd return home from war. Would her father be proud of her, or would he be disappointed that she'd deceived him? Some nights she couldn't sleep for the worry that her father would look at her the way his false Fa Zhou looked at her now, as if no one in the world could have disappointed him so much. "Don't let him get to you," she reminded herself. "Just play along." "I didn't," she said quietly. "You show yourself here, unannounced, after leaving without a word, after stealing my armor and taking my place in the army. Given what you have done, what makes you think your mother and I would accept you back into this family?" "I was trying to save you. It would have been better if you had let me go. You would have died." Fa Zhou pounded his cane on the ground. "Better I die with honor than live with the disgrace of my only child as brought upon this house." His words stung, even though Mulan knew this was all magic, just an illusion of her father that the Chamber of Mirrors wanted her to see. She stormed toward the walls, trying to find a way out. No matter where she turned, Fa Zhou followed her, appearing in the glass. She couldn't escape them. "These are lies," she said. "My father would never say this." "Wouldn't he?" the voices from the glass whispered. They were in her mind now. Oh, how her head throbbed. The question tugged at her heart. "He wouldn't." She shook her head, recalling her last day at home. It had been burned into her memory. After failing her examination with the matchmaker, she'd gone to the garden to be alone. She'd been inconsolable until her father found her and sat next to her. My, what beautiful flowers we have this year," he'd remarked. "But look at this. This one's late. I bet when it blooms, it will be the most beautiful of all." Her father always knew how to comfort her. Mulan still repeated those words to herself sometimes. As if Fa Zhou in the mirror could read her thoughts, he held out a blossom in his hand. The limp petals sagged into his palm, dried and withered. "I was wrong." He crushed the flowers in his fist. The blossom will never bloom. It is dead to me. Mulan watched the petals flake onto the ground. Anger swelled in her chest so tight it became hard to breathe. How dare this projection of Fa Zhu ruin what had been one of her most tender memories of her father? My father encouraged me to see strength within, Mulan told the mayor crisply. When I was a little girl, he told me that life is a journey, one whose path diverges due to the choices I made. He told me not to worry about how difficult a path might look, for the only one worth following was the one that my heart chose. She waited, but the Fa Zhu in the mirror said nothing. My father would understand what I did. He believes in me. I did believe in you, Fa Zhu replied coldly. But that was because I trusted you. Do you know how worried your mother was when we found you had left home? Do you know how much danger you put your family into when you impersonated my son who does not exist? It does not matter if your intentions were honorable. The risks you took were too great, and they cannot be forgotten. Was that really what Baba would think? Mulan swallowed. Doubt swarmed inside her, and no matter how she tried to quell it, she could not. Her mother appeared beside him, carrying a tray of tea. Distress lined her face, and she wouldn't look Mulan in the eye. Baba is right, Fa Li added, passing Fa Zhu a cup of tea. Everyone saw the Emperor's council give him the conscription notice. The neighbors have been wondering why your father is not serving. Mulan glanced at her father. He sat quietly holding his teacup, but not drinking. He wouldn't look at her. A secret like that cannot be kept forever, her mother finished. I did not mean to. War broke your father's body, Fa Li interrupted again. But you have broken his heart, Mulan. Her mother's words were like a punch to Mulan's stomach. Mulan felt her knees lock and her breath catch. It was true her father's health was weak. She'd always prided herself in helping her mother take care of him, making sure he had company in his morning walks about the garden, that he wore an extra robe over his clothes when it was cold, and that he ate enough cabbage and carrots and celery at dinner. But she'd never stopped to worry about how her decision to leave home might affect his heart. Fa Zhu choked on his tea. Fa Li dropped the rest of the tray and rushed to help him. See how weak he is? Her mother rebuked Mulan. It is because of you. You should have not come back. No! Mulan bolted up to the mirrors, but her parents disappeared from the glass. She clenched her fists. This is all a lie. My parents won't renounce me when I go back. They won't. Why should this fate be so unbelievable? The mysterious voices taunted. You disappointed them, Mulan. First when you could not make a match, then when you ran away from your failure. I was trying to help them. You went for yourself, the mirrors hissed. You told Captain Li Shang that it was the truth. You left home out of selfishness. You will never find acceptance. Not at home, not in the army, not anywhere. That is your fate, Fa Mulan. Before she could reply, the empty mirrors fogged and misted. This time the entire chamber went alive, every mirror capturing Fa Zhu and Fa Li's neighbors, until their entire village occupied the room. The villagers whispered to one another, just loud enough for Mulan to hear. That's her, she's back. The whispers grew louder. Do you see what she's wearing? The woman scoffed. Trousers. And her hair, so short. Do you see the way she walks, with her chin up like she owns the world? Such impudence. My daughter would get an earful if she went out looking like that and strutting out like that. Mulan didn't flinch, not even as the insults brought back the pangs of loneliness she'd felt in the hall of echoing forests. No matter how real everything looked, she'd been in Daiyu long enough not to fall for the enchantment. But what was the test here? How was she supposed to get out of here? By letting them insult her, or by fighting back? I used to think she was just clumsy, her family's baker said. She's a discredit to her father's name. Who does she think she is? Her father was a legendary warrior. It's a shame they never had a boy. Do you remember how Fa Zhu used to let the girl go wild? Even gave her a horse. Look what that's come of that. I still can't believe she ran away to join the army. Maybe they put her up to it. The old man can barely walk anymore. Wouldn't surprise me if he was behind the whole idea. My father said nothing to do with my going to war, Mulan shouted back. It was my choice. A woman doesn't get a choice. If the Emperor had wanted women in his army, he would have said so. You're a traitor. This isn't real, she reminded herself. This isn't real. The villagers weren't listening. Did you think the Emperor would honor you even if you saved China? When he finds out what you've done, he'll have you killed. You're a traitor. I'm not a traitor, Mulan cried. I did it for my father. Traitor, traitor. The villagers yelled, their accusations growing so loud Mulan couldn't distinguish one from the other. She let them scream at her. She could bear it. Then a little girl threw a bouquet of withered flowers at Mulan. The action, so quick and unexpected, stunned her. She stared at the little girl, whose black hair was braided to the side and adorned with a simple blossom. She looked so much like me, Mulan thought, when I was her age. How could you, Fa Mulan? Said the little girl, sounding more sad than angry. How could you lie to your parents and dishonor them that way? I didn't mean to, Mulan whispered. I didn't. Seeing they'd hurt her, more children appeared, flinging withered flowers at Mulan. They'll never understand, she thought. Every time I try to explain myself, they twist my words. Breaking through the crowd, Mulan ran. The villagers parted for her, sneering and hissing as she fled. There wasn't far to go before she hit the wall. But when she looked up, she found herself back at the training camp with the other soldiers. She turned back. Gone was the village and even her home. There were only mountains in the distance and a line of familiar-looking pitched tents and an armory of swords, bows, and arrows. Shang appeared, his lip curled with disdain when he saw her. What are you doing here? I told you to go home. Mulan stood her ground. She raised her chin at the captain, another one of his chamber's illusions. Why do you think I'm here? I am trying to go home. Shang stared her down. If not for the hard glass under Mulan's feet, she might have forgotten he wasn't real, that he was simply a projection of the Shang waiting for her outside, for her to free them. With every passing second, everything in the Chamber of Mirrors felt more and more real. From the sweat on Shang's forehead to the wrinkles on his shirt, even the flags behind him fluttered with the wind, and Mulan thought she could smell pine from the trees in the nearby forest. Shang grimaced. To think I considered you my friend. I've never been more wrong about anything in my life. I am your friend. Friend? Shang laughed. You nearly got me killed with your foolish maneuver at the Tongshao Pass. Shan Yu was right in front of you and you missed him. Do you know why you couldn't defeat him? Because you're a girl, said her friend Yao, coming up from behind her. With him were the rest of the soldiers, Mulan's friends. Ling wrinkled his nose at her. I can't believe we trained together. Girls can't be soldiers, Shang yelled. The men shouted in agreement. They're weak, and they cry at the first sign of danger. Shang raised his hand, and a gust of wind pushed her to the side of the field. Get out of here. You aren't fit to serve the Emperor. Mulan tumbled, falling on her backside. The soldiers laughed, Ling and Yao particularly loudly. Even Chiang Po couldn't bear to look at her. I'm not going anywhere, she said, getting up. I belong here. You belong nowhere, Shang said sharply. To betray the Emperor is to betray China. Your life is meaningless. Mulan swallowed. Even if he wasn't the real Shang, what he said was true. The Emperor would have her killed if he knew. You've said all this before, but you didn't mean it. Didn't I? Shang scowled. The penalty for what you've done is death. Yao grabbed a bow and raised it at Mulan. Say the word, boss. Shang paused, and Mulan thought maybe she'd gotten through to him. Maybe making everyone see that she wasn't worthless was the key to getting out of this chamber. Yao, Chiang Po, and Ling pointed their arrows at her. She couldn't even hear the thudding of her heart. The soldiers' disapproving chorus drowned out her shouts. No, Mulan cried again. Shang, you can't. This isn't real. I know it isn't, said Shang. To her horror, the captain's body paled, becoming blue and luminous. He strode out of the mirror to show her he wasn't the reflection like everyone else's. But I am. No, she whispered. Only one of us leaves Dai Yu alive, he said, his jaw tightening with resolve. I'm afraid it's not going to be you. Then Chang's eyes, glassy as the mirrors surrounding them, hardened. Fire!